Even one down the sideline, and he's got Cass over the top. Big side, down the sideline. Touchdown. His signature move and his signature performance. Allen, big ball one more time. 58 yards this time.
You're listening to the Bruin Bible. This is your host, Will Decker, bringing you UCLA football content all throughout the year for LA Football Network.
What is up, guys, and welcome out to the Bruin Bible. Will Decker, your host, here for, God damn it. What is up, and welcome to another edition of the Bruin Bible. Will Decker, your host. Make sure you guys are liking and subscribing the podcast. We are brought to you guys today by our advertisers. Our advertisers are Bell to Bell Fitness, Shea Tor, a realtor out in Arizona, former Bruin alum, and my main man Howard Chang, a realtor right here in Los Angeles. Let's go through them, guys. Bell to Bell Fitness is a boxing gym on the West Coast used by their FIT acronym, Fight Inspired Training. My main man, Tony Gonzalez, was the boxing coach for UCLA for over 10 years. He has built this gym on the West Side to learn how to boxing, stay in shape, and get you all the essentials you need to become somebody that is obsessed with boxing and fitness. Make sure to check it out. Go into Bell to Bell Fitness and say you heard about it from the Bruin Bible, and you're going to get a free session with Tony Gonzalez. So make sure to check that out. Shea Tor, my main man. Shea Tor is a licensed real estate agent in Arizona and a lifelong Bruin. He's a current Wooden Athletic Fund donor and football season ticket holder. When not selling houses or going to UCLA games, he loves to travel the country, checking out different arenas, ballparks, and stadiums. If you're looking to make the move to Arizona or know someone who is, please reach out to our loyal friend, Mr. Shea Tor. His phone number is 602-487-3975. Once again, his number is 602-487-3975. Make sure to check that out. And then the local realtor we got out here, Howard Chang. Howard Chang is a local realtor with the Serene team at eXp Realty. Their team has an office right here in Culver City, though they help clients buy and sell homes all over the LA County and the surrounding areas. Howard and his team do a ton of business and are super in tune with the market, knowing winning strategies to give their clients a competitive advantage, have amazing vendor referrals, are a one-stop shop for anything real estate, and just provide a ton of value for their clients. Howard and his partner, Kyle Draper, are UCLA alums and a huge fans of the UCLA football and basketball programs. You often see them at games, tailgating and networking, and staying involved with the UCLA alumni community. They would love to help any fellow alumni with accomplishing their real estate goals. So if you guys have any real estate needs in the LA area, look no further. Howard is your guy. All right, guys, we're going to go into the episode. What is up, and welcome to the latest edition of the Bruin Bible. Will Decker, your host. I'm joined by a very special guest today, Big Ten Ted in the house. Going to be talking UCLA's schedule heading into the Big Ten. It's a new conference. We're trying to educate the fan base on who they're going to be playing, what to expect out there, and everything and more. Big Ten Ted, for those that do not know, one of the experts when it comes to the conference. Throw this guy a follow on YouTube, Twitter. Ted, where's the best place to find you? And more importantly, how are you doing this morning as it's 9 a.m. West Coast time? What's it like out in the Midwest where you're at in Wisconsin, I believe?
I'm based in the Twin Cities in Minnesota, so I'm from Wisconsin originally, but I will say I do appreciate Will maybe more than any other West Coast reporter, because he always kind of translate that central time to me when we're kind of trying to coordinate your schedule. So otherwise, sometimes when I'm dealing with Oregon, USC, and Washington folks, I kind of got to do the math in my head, and this Minnesota math sometimes doesn't always add up. But yeah, you can find me on Twitter at Big Ten Ted over there on Twitter, also on YouTube. In the last month or so, put on the audio platform, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, looking to get over there as well. So if you're more of an audio listener, you can have your 8 to 10, 12-minute bites that I kind of do on the audio side as well. But yeah, it's been great over here in the Midwest. It's nice. It's that late spring, early summer weather, looking forward to kind of what's to come. Those great camping weekends up in northern Minnesota that I tend to do a lot of the time as well. So it's great here in the Twin Cities. We had a pretty mild spring actually. Not a ton of snow that we usually get it in April or so. Yes, that snow might be a little bit foreign to you guys down there in Southern California, right? We're kind of crossing paths here in the Big Ten with some of these cultures and lifestyles, and weather, right, is certainly one of those talking points. But it's been great. It's been great here in the Midwest. Looking forward to talking some Bruin football.
Dude, we love having you on, man. And it's going to be a blast. You got to talk to me about these camping trips up in northern Minnesota as well at some point, man. But, it was one of those clear things for me where it's new conference. We don't know a lot about the opponents, West Big Ten, for a long period of time. And I just want to get educated on some of these guys. Maybe you can tell me some points. Maybe you can tell our fan base some points, some, maybe interesting competitions that are happening at some of these schools. Different players that could give this team problems down the line, different scenarios like that, Ted. And I think we got to just dive into the UCLA schedule as it starts, man. When the first game that UCLA plays on a Big Ten schedule in the conference is against, the Indiana Hoosiers. Curt Cignetti, hot candidate coach coming out of James Madison this year. And you look at what they're able to build, man. They got a lot of good things going on there. 13 transfers and counting coming from James Madison. So he's really building on that lineage he was able to establish there with that school specifically. He's got Curtis Rourke coming in, who is a, MAC kind of staple. He's played 4 to 5 years within the MAC conference at Ohio, has a lot of starting experience at the quarterback position. And you look at the wide receiver room, Elijah Surratt was one of the best receivers, in the transfer portal period. The fact that he goes to a team like Indiana, there's a lot to work with there. I thought Donavyn McCulley was a little underrated last year, led the team in catches. He's returning as well. Talk to me about what, Indiana would be on the football field, in your opinion, as we head into the 2024 season, because a lot of inexperiences, a lot of unknowns, but Cignetti is a very talented coach, and I would bet on him figuring it out faster than he does too late.
Boy, I love what they got in Curt Cignetti. I think Indiana, this is a term that I think carries a lot of weight, but I think they hit a home run with this coaching hire. I love what he did at that basketball game, firing up this fan base, saying Purdue sucks, but so does Ohio State and so does Michigan. Really saying that we have higher aspirations than maybe what has currently existed in Bloomington, Indiana. This is a team that has completely flipped their roster. Okay, when you look at what they were under Tom Allen, and this is kind of the era that we live in. Sometimes when you go from one team and 1 year to another, when there is a coaching change, you got to throw everything you know about that previous regime, crumple it up and throw it in the garbage, because this is a new team. Now, it makes some of those early games, which your Bruins do have against Indiana, a little bit of a wild card. This is a game that when you look at UCLA's early schedule, it's just their second game of the season. So we'll see what Curt Cignetti has put on film at that point in time. But really for IU, it is their success or lack of success is really determined like you said, can some of these JMU transfers really go from the group of 5 to this power 2 type of level, just like Curt himself? Can they make that jump? Can a guy like Elijah Surratt be a playmaker at IU? Curt Cignetti and this coaching staff is known for developing quarterbacks. They are known for developing offenses. And you look at Curtis Rourke, he's been banged up at Ohio, but when he was healthy, he was very effective at the group of 5 level in the MAC with the Bobcats. So if those two sides, Rourke and this coaching staff that is really good at developing that quarterback talent, if they can get together and that magic potion can kind of mix, this is an Indiana team that I think could put up some points. Now, they certainly do have some holes. Like I'm not going to get away from that, but I really like the transfer pieces that they've brought in at IU. IU is one of the teams that I've kind of got as maybe a sleeper or a surprise team. Now, a surprise for a team like Indiana, that would be something like a 6 wins. That'd be something like a 7 wins, in that range. We're not talking jumping up all the way into the upper tier for Indiana, specifically where they've been the last few years under Tom Allen. And I even looked these last few years. You look at this Indiana team down the stretch. You look at those I think it was like the last 4 or 5 games, all were within 7 to 10 points late in the year. And I know that, like I said, this roster has completely flipped, but this is an Indiana team that I think folks should be on the lookout for. As, don't think you're just going to walk in and defeat the Indiana Hoosiers. I like what they did on the defensive side of the ball as well with some of these transfers as well. CJ West, Wisconsin was after CJ West on the defensive line from Kent State. That's a big addition over there on the D line. And then some of those guys coming over from JMU as well. Just go ahead and look at some of these defensive transfers coming over from the Dukes and the sheer numbers, the TFL numbers, the sack numbers that they put up at James Madison. These are guys that had high level of production. Now, playing in the Sun Belt versus playing in the Big Ten, how do those numbers translate? That's going to be the big question. But this is a little bit of a tricky kind of first conference game for the Bruins.
Yeah, September 14th, the first home game of the season for UCLA, playing the Indiana Hoosiers. And UCLA fans are no stranger to a Duke transfer. Jake Bobo, now with the Seattle Seahawks up there. Britton Brown, now with the Las Vegas Raiders. Gary Smith currently on the roster. So we know these Duke transfers can ball. So we're going to have to be circling what's going on there on the defensive line. Next, Big Ten opponent. And we are more familiar with this team, but I'm interested to get your take on this.
Yep.
The Oregon Ducks are a hot pick coming into the year to potentially win the Big Ten. I know Ohio State's going to be right there. I may have Ohio State just a step ahead of the Oregon Ducks, but it's pretty neck and neck. They're going to have a chance to play each other in the regular season at the Horseshoe. You look at what Dan Lanning is building there from not only a recruiting standpoint, but even the transfer portal. Dylan Gabriel, just one of these guys that feels like he's played college football for like 7 years at this point, coming to the Oregon Ducks. A lot of talent there, a lot of experience. We kind of know what we're going to get with a Dylan Gabriel, right? A really talented quarterback who may even take that next step into the Heisman race if Oregon is what we think they are next year. Evan Stewart was the most talented wide receiver in the transfer portal. You get him from Texas A&M. Yep. Former 5-star wideout, explosive, talented. I think the biggest shocker of all, Jabbar Muhammad was the best secondary player for Washington last year. You got to understand, this is a new rivalry coming to the Big Ten. Washington against Oregon is a heated matchup. Their fans do not like each other. There's a lot of trash talk online. So for Jabbar Muhammad to, say, hey, I'm going to go switching the Ducks, on a lesser level, it's almost like someone going from Ohio State to Michigan or vice versa, or somebody going from, Auburn to Alabama. It's a big deal. This team has a lot of talent. I'm interested to see on the surface, what are you thinking of Dan Lanning and what he's building up there in Eugene for the Ducks?
He's so good at assembling the roster, I think, in today's day and age. And in a couple of years, of course, there's going to be probably a financial and a salary part of this as well. But how he's been able to manage NIL and transfers and recruiting and stacking great recruiting classes on top of each other, but also bringing in some of the best transfer classes as well. Oregon has just done a great job at assembling this team. A little bit later on in this week, I'm going to record, I might have a show coming out next week that talks about, is this Oregon team the best Ducks team in the history of that program? And that is a realistic argument, I think, right now for this team up in Eugene, because they've always been good on the offensive side of the ball, really since the Chip Kelly years, right? That's always been kind of their identity, right? Their flashy uniforms, their offense. You know what you get when you look at the Oregon Ducks, but now they're just more deeper. I talk about the depth of talent when you talk about this Oregon team. You look at up front, you look at on defense and how deep they are, maybe compared to some of these other great teams, 2011, 2014, whatever, when you look at the history of this Oregon program. So I think they just bring that much more to the Big Ten. And I think that this is a team right out of the bat from the 4 teams that are coming over from the West Coast. I think this is a team that is best suited to really plug and play into that top level of the Big Ten Conference right now. And you have this team that's built on the interior really well. And then you have the explosive weapons that you mentioned on the outside. Like if they just would have brought back Tez Johnson and Gary Bryant and Trayshawn Holden and all these guys, they would have been fine. Oh, ho, hum, let's go out and get Evan Stewart. Right? It's just and there's so many great things that you can talk about and break down with this opponent. But then there's some under the radar kid. Like they got a Division II running back transfer that balled out in the spring game, Jay Harris, that I'm really excited about as well. Like there's going to be some guys that kind of rise to the occasion as well. Kenyon Sadiq, right? A very versatile tight end that was involved in the spring game and in the Fiesta Bowl late last year in some run schemes as well. So they can do so many different things on offense. They look really, really good on the defensive side of the football as well. It's just, how do they blend in, right, to this conference, to the Big Ten right now? Because that's the big question, okay, especially with Oregon, when we talk about all the great pieces, 1 through 11, both on offense and defense. But for as good as they are, still moving from the Pac-12 to a conference like the Big Ten, it's still an adjustment. Okay, it's still an adjustment. It's just a little bit of a different style of play, and it's adapting to that. I think Oregon is going to do just fine, but that is still something that I have my eye on, is how do they and the other 3 West Coast teams really adjust to this? Because some people might think something's better, or some people might think something's worse. That's fine. But it's still an adjustment, right? Playing some of these other teams. But you mentioned this Oregon team. Yeah, that is a team with a lot of firepower. UCLA is certainly going to have to find a way to try to contain some of that firepower in that early season matchup.
Yeah, it's just a different style of play and just a different environment to play. And a lot of these kids are West Coast kids, Texas kids, things of that nature. They got to go to Ann Arbor early November, and then they got to go play your Wisconsin Badgers on the 16th of November at Camp Randall. So, I mean, just different environments, colder environments. These kids are just not used to it at the end of the day. So it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out long-term. October 5th. And I want to say this, Ted, I was ready to declare the Penn State Nittany Lions. I thought this was going to be the year where they're going to get it over, and then very well might be that way. The one thing that's kind of giving me pause, if I'm being honest with you, Ted, Keandre Lambert-Smith, last year's leading receiver, transfers to Auburn, and King Mack, a guy who's going to be a star safety for them, transferring to Alabama. Those are just kind of huge losses in the transfer portal that is just giving me pause. With that being said, I think we can talk about, Drew Allar being one of the more talented quarterbacks within the entire conference. There's a real case if he reaches his ceiling and builds upon his first real year as a starter. This guy could be the best quarterback in the conference. You know what I mean? They've got different guys out there. Nick Singleton leading the running back room there. Very, very talented. Talk to me about Penn State, because I still think they're going to have a real shot at making the college football playoff. But those losses, like just those 2 guys leaving, it really prevented me from picking them outright to win the Big Ten and being a surprise pick for a lot of people.
Boy, how much different would the view of the Penn State program be if there was a 12-team college football playoff since 2014? They would have been in the playoff. Geez, what do we? That would be 10 years. They'd be in the playoff like half the time. Okay, I'd have to go back and really crunch the numbers on that, but they'd have at least 3 or 4 appearances at that point, and that's just such a different conversation that you can tell to recruits and said, well, we can't get past Ohio State and Michigan in the Big Ten East. We're kind of stuck here, 10 wins, 8, 9, whatever it is. Now, all of a sudden, hey, we're a playoff team. Now, all of a sudden, that's a different type of sell to recruits. But when you get into this year's team, I love what Drew Allar has on his good days, right? When he looks good, he really looks good. There's some other times that he struggles. Now, depending on who you ask, there's different reasons for that struggle, okay? Is it Drew himself? Is it the receiver's inability to get open, right? And you mentioned the transfer of KLS. Outside of this program as well. That's a wide receiver position that I think there's going to be opportunity for some of these young guys to certainly step up. They got Julian Fleming coming over, a 5-star from Ohio State, put up a really good season a couple of years back. And you look at him, and I think he's that deep threat down the field that Penn State needs. They really didn't have that. They weren't really able to stretch the field and really provide that threat in terms of the deep ball. When you have such a great running back tandem with Nick Singleton and Katron Allen, you need to be able to stretch the field. Drew Allar certainly has the arm to do so. He's certainly got the arm strength to do so. I think former offensive coordinator Mike Yurcich kind of just had this offense in a box a little bit. You bring in Andy Kotelnicki coming over from Kansas, right? What they had with Jalen Daniels, Devin Neal, and some of those guys over there at Kansas, that was an explosive offense. That was one of the best offenses in the Big 12 here these last few years. So maybe that's what Penn State really needs to really open up this offense. If this offense can indeed open up specifically in the passing game, this is a Penn State team that has all the ingredients to make the playoff and contend at the top of the Big Ten Conference this season. I look at that defense, right? That was a nasty defense last year. And it's still going to be pretty darn good this year. Now, you lose Manny Diaz. He's going over to Duke to be the head coach there. He was the defensive coordinator. Former IU head coach. We're talking about Indiana before. Okay, Tom Allen. He comes over to be the defensive coordinator here at Penn State. But I think one thing that fans really need to watch out for is you've got an all Big Ten linebacker, right, that's wearing the number 11, which legends like Micah Parsons and LeVar Arrington have worn in Happy Valley. He's moving from linebacker, and he's moving to the edge rusher. He's moving to defensive end. I saw him in the spring game, and I thought he put on a little bit of muscle and put on a little bit of weight. This guy is going to be fantastic coming off the edge. Their edge rushers with Abdul Carter on one side, Dennis Sutton on the other side, that's going to be very difficult to deal with. Okay. Those pass rushers, I think, are going to be some of the best in the conference. You look at the interior of the defensive line, it's pretty good. But ever since PJ Mustipher left a few years ago, that's kind of been something that they've been looking to solidify and maybe hasn't been the strengths of their defense. They're depending on some young linebackers to really step up, the Dominic DeLucas, Tony Rojas's of the world to really step up now with Abdul moving to defensive line for those young linebackers to really step up. You mentioned the defensive backfield. I feel pretty good about their safeties. It's their corners. They get A.J. Harris coming over from Georgia, Jalen Kimber coming over from Florida. They feel pretty good about those guys, but once again, they haven't played. They were highly recruited guys that went to the SEC, but haven't received a ton of playing time. How is that all going to mesh together? I feel good about their defense. I'm not sure if it'll be as good as last season. Their offense really needs to take that step up in the passing game this year. If they do, this could be the team of 2024 because Nick Singleton, he proved during his freshman season that he can be a game breaker. Katron Allen can be a great running back as well. These are guys that have, in 2 years, have really combined for a lot of yards in the run game. So I think it all depends on this pass game, right? If Penn State wants to reach that next level, they don't have Michigan on the schedule this year. They get Ohio State at home as well. So there's a lot working for them right now. And there's rumors out there that are saying that that Ohio State game could be a whiteout, which certainly puts them at an advantageous situation in that game against the Buckeyes as well. So Penn State is that team that, everybody's talking about Ohio State and Oregon. I think Penn State right now is that team that not a ton of people are talking about, at least on that high level in the conference, and they should be because they're very close. They're very close. They just need that downfield passing game to really open up and balance out this offense.
Yeah, and the thing you can bank on with Penn State is big physical football teams may have the best running duo within the conference.
Yep.
Like you said, you got Ohio State at home. Before Michigan's had this run against Ohio State, Penn State was really the one team that kind of put fear in the Buckeyes fan base when they played one another. So it's going to be a lot of fun to see that one play out. The next week, October 12th, Minnesota Golden Gophers. So PJ Fleck, I have an immense amount of respect for. I do think he's going to be in a little bit of trouble this year within the conference, just given how deep it is now. You're adding 4 very quality opponents, teams like that on top of what the Big Ten already was as one of the top conferences within college football. He's going to be bringing over Max Brosmer, the New Hampshire former quarterback. And Fleck, I mean, it's not a negative to say that PJ Fleck is going to have an off year. This guy has just gotten Minnesota 3 straight bowl games, including 2 back-to-back 9-win seasons in 2022 and 2021. There's a lot to work with here. I might just be a little lower on Minnesota given the totality of the conference, but is there anything to kind of hang your hat on for Minnesota as we head to the season?
Oh, you mentioned Max Brosmer, and that's a big upgrade, I think, at quarterback. You have Ethan Kelly-McManus transfers out. He's going over to Rutgers. Just a lot of inconsistency from AK8 last year, and Max Brosmer graded highly according to PFF, put up some really big numbers in the FCS at New Hampshire, and I think this offense needs to be a little bit more balanced. The last couple of years, they've really leaned on the run game. You look at Muhammad Ibrahim, the leading rusher in Gopher history a couple of years ago. You look at true freshman Darius Taylor last year, who they're really excited about, who could be one of the best backs in the Big Ten if he stays healthy. He was kind of banged up at times last season as well. So his health is very key to the success of the Golden Gophers of the season. They need a balanced offense because they were just run, and we need to hope to play some defense, right? That I think the key for Minnesota, okay, you can talk about offense, but not having Joe Rossi as the defensive coordinator, that is a big loss. Prior to this last season, Joe Rossi put together top 10, top 20 defenses in the country. Okay, so they were playing some really good defense in Minneapolis. Now he's gone. I think that's a bigger loss than some people are realizing right now because they were so reliant on running the football effectively and playing really good defense. And if you lose a key cog in the machine, that is Joe Rossi. Look at how Minnesota was playing defense before Joe Rossi, and then we'll see what happens after Joe Rossi. Ever since he took over, this defensive scheme and this defensive prowess at Minnesota really took a lot of a step up. I like what Minnesota, though, has on the offensive side of the football. If Brosmer can translate his talent to the Big Ten, if Darius Taylor stays healthy and he's a good running back, right, that they've got some weapons on the outside as well. Daniel Jackson, the leading receiver from last season, also returns for Minnesota. This is a key year for PJ Fleck, right? Because he had that big 11-win year right off the bat in 2019, just a couple of years into his coaching tenure with the Golden Gophers. And then you look at 9-win seasons, bowl victories, and then you dip down to a 5-7 regular season. You go to 6-7 after the win in the Quick Lane Bowl. What's the direction of this program, especially now with no Big Ten West, especially now with no divisions? How does this Minnesota program, how does this Minnesota team adjust? Like, if Max Brosmer does not turn into that quarterback, this is a Minnesota team that could be in some trouble. But then again, if he does translate, if they have some balance on offense, if the defense if they continue maybe where they were at under Rossi and there isn't much drop off, this is a Minnesota team that could maybe surprise some people. But, 2019 seems a long ways away, that 11-win season. It really does. And even in those 9-win seasons, you've seen Minnesota lose to teams that they really should have beaten. Heck, you even look at last year, right? Blowing a 21-point lead on the road in the fourth quarter against Northwestern. Okay, there are just some games that pop up on the schedule for PJ Fleck in Minnesota where you feel like they should win. A couple of years ago at home against Bowling Green. Like, these are games that you should be able to finish. These are games that you should be able to win. Now, he did get the monkey off his back by beating the Iowa Hawkeyes finally this past year, but, there are some concerns, I think, for this Minnesota team. And I'm very intrigued to see how this game goes against UCLA. You guys got some weapons over there with the Bruins. We talk about the newness, especially coaching-wise with the coordinator on defense. That could be an interesting matchup between UCLA and Minnesota.
And, all respect to Max Brosmer on the surface, but I think if you're hanging your hat on an FCS quarterback making a big jump to the Big Ten, that's a tough situation to be in. I will say this. I think if the game plan does not go as advertised for Minnesota this year, they have a losing season, I do think they would be fools to put PJ Fleck on the hot seat because he has brought them the most success of any coach we've had in the next 30 to 40 years, with the program. So keep PJ Fleck there, may not be Kirk Ferentz, but he's kind of like Kirk Ferentz Jr. to me, where it's like, just keep that guy at the program. Every 3 to 4 years, you're going to have some good teams play out. Yeah. I just don't know if it's this year, given how loaded the conference is. So we're going to go away from that one real quick. Rutgers, Greg Schiano is back. They got the quarterback you just mentioned from Minnesota. How do I pronounce his last name? I want to make it sure. Kaliakmanis?
Kaliakmanis.
Kaliakmanis. Ethan Kaliakmanis coming through from Minnesota. One of the best secondaries within the country, one of the best defenses within the country last year, a top 20 total defense coming from Rutgers. Just signature Greg Schiano, hard hat defense is coming in there. Not going to be an easy opponent. I actually feel better about Rutgers than I do feel about Minnesota. If they figure out some of the offensive pieces there, this team could be a fringe sleeper contender within the conference. What do you think about Rutgers as we head to the season?
Rutgers getting to 8 wins is very possible. There is a path to that type of season for the Rutgers Scarlet Knights. And, the schedule certainly plays into their favor as well. But this is just a really good Greg Schiano football team. I said this last year about the Rutgers Scarlet Knights. When I watch Rutgers on television, it looks like it's painful to play the Rutgers Scarlet Knights. They play that smash mouth style of football. This is in no slight to Rutgers, but I just call them mini Michigan. Right. They just have that, and Greg Schiano and Jim Harbaugh, it seems like they have that same type of mindset. They want to bring in their guys. They want to develop them. They want to be smash mouth football. They want to play you at the line of scrimmage. I was very impressed how Rutgers was able to bring back as much as they brought back on the defensive side of the ball. Like with the talent that they had, you could maybe see some of these players end up transferring to go elsewhere, maybe a bigger program in the Big Ten or the SEC. But Greg Schiano invests NIL, we'll call it on the back end, right? He recruits players, maybe doesn't unload the cash to get really good players out of high school, but once you prove yourself for a year or 2 years, that's when you're able to really capitalize on those opportunities in Piscataway, New Jersey. But I love this defense that they have this year for Rutgers. And the big problem for the Scarlet Knights was their passing game. Okay, they're hoping that the reunion of Kirk Shiraka, who was the offensive coordinator at Minnesota that recruited Ethan Kaliakmanis, they're hoping that that reunion can boost the pass game a little bit. I watched the spring game. And it was like watching an Ethan Kaliakmanis game before. I saw some throws that says, wow, that's pretty good. That's the 4-star type of talent that we were looking for when he was a quarterback coming out of the state of Illinois. But then there are some throws that make you scratch your head. It's the inconsistency, I think, that really did him in. But the good thing about Rutgers is they have a run game to lean on. They returned the Big Ten's leading rusher and Kyle Monangai. Somehow, some way, this guy's flying under the radar. It's crazy to me that a leading rusher in the Big Ten Conference is flying under the radar, but that's kind of how he is right now. I really love what they have. Sam Brown is another running back in that backfield. That's a team that's going to look to establish the run. Now, I talked about the pass game and how they needed to really unleash that. They went into the transfer portal and got some good players. You talk about Daimir Miller transferring over. That's another FCS transfer. 1,200 yards, 9 touchdowns last year. But here's the thing about Rutgers and maybe some of the players that they're bringing in at the wide receiver position. They just need speed and skill. They really didn't have much last year. With Gavin Wimsett at quarterback, he ended up transferring out of the program. He was maybe more of a runner than maybe a downfield thrower, and maybe that's why they invested so much into the run game. But I look at Daimir Miller. Nassim Brantley had an NCAA issue last year, but he was highly regarded coming out once again into their FCS transfer as well. Like they've got some talented new receivers coming into this room that I think are certainly going to help them push the football down the field. Like if Rutgers does develop a pass game, this is a team that's going to be very difficult to defend. And like we said about their defense, that's just a bring your lunch pail, hard hat type of defense on the other side of the ball. They return a lot. Aaron Lewis on the defensive line is someone to watch out for, getting after the quarterback as well. This is a Rutgers team that nobody is going to want to play against. This is a pesky, tough type of football team up there in Piscataway, New Jersey.
Yeah, I mean, there's a case when all is said and done, they may have the best defense within the conference. So, I mean, Rutgers is one of those teams you're really circling. I'm quickly going to go through the next 3 opponents, but I want to get your thoughts on these.
Mm-hmm.
November 2nd, Nebraska. I am very, very high on Nebraska. If Dylan Raiola can kind of elevate his status as that 5-star and get out there and make an immediate impact at the quarterback position for Nebraska, that's going to be in Lincoln on November 2nd. Friday, November 8th, we got the Friday night game against the Iowa Hawkeyes. We talked about it, dude. The most infuriating football team to watch last year because that defense, top 10. You know, we talked about Rutgers defense. I mean, this defense was even better last year on so many different metrics. And you can't even make this up, Ted. 130th out of 130 Division I teams in total offense last year. That is as bad as it gets for the Iowa Hawkeyes. So I'm hoping to see some improvement there. Tim Lester hired as the offensive coordinator, former Western Michigan head coach. So I'm looking forward to that. And then Washington. This is kind of a team where they've lost a lot of talent in their bank. You know, no Michael Penix, no Roma Dunze, McMillan, that offensive line. A lot of those pieces have moved on. Even DeBoer's moved on, who's now at Alabama. But what I will say to you guys is Jed Fish is one of the most underrated coaches in the country. If you look at the job he did when going to Arizona, that team was maybe the worst Power 5 team in every single conference. He got them back within 9-10 wins, like no time, 2 to 3 years. He's going to do good things at Washington. So talk to me very quickly about your Nebraskas, your Iowas, and your Washingtons for the UCLA Bruins.
You know, it seems like, what is it? It's almost June, and it seems like we repeat this every year about Nebraska. Here they come. It is the year of the Cornhuskers. I feel like that's a little bit different this year. Year 2 under Matt Rule just feels a little bit different. They return a defense that took a major step up. Tony White was a first-year defensive coordinator last year. They've got a fantastic defensive line. with Ty Robinson has a lot of experience. Jamari Butler, and you got the polar bear, also the wrestler in the Nebraska wrestling team, Nash Hutmaker in the middle. Man, that guy just knows how to use leverage right there on the defensive line. They've got a lot of experience coming back on this defense that could be a top 6, top 5 type of defense in the Big Ten, certainly next season. Dylan Raiola showed out in the spring game. It's a spring game. I get it, right? I get it. But I look at this talent. I can't remember the last time, maybe ever, that there has been this much talent at the quarterback position for the Nebraska Cornhuskers. It's not exactly a quarterback factory. We're not exactly setting the highest of bars. I also get that. But maybe this is the piece to get Nebraska back to that promised land. I'm very curious to see how they approach the offensive side of the football. They've got depth at the receiver position. We'll see if anybody really stands out. A lot of good. We'll see how much great really exists at that position. I like the running back tandem in there as well. You mentioned the Iowa Hawkeyes and their struggles on the offensive side of the ball. They've been well documented. I'm very curious about quarterback. Cade McNamara, banged up through spring. Seems like he's progressing, but they also bring in Brendan Sullivan, who filled in for a couple of games at Northwestern last year and looked pretty good. So I think that's the first key, that they wanted some depth in the quarterback room where, hey, if Cade isn't able to go, if Cade those injuries are just too much for him, we need a viable option. And Brendan Sullivan has 2 years of eligibility. So you could easily see Iowa selling him on the fact that Cade has 1 more year of eligibility. If things go in Cade's direction this year, he can certainly come back and be the starter next season. But I think that's going to be a battle going into fall camp at the quarterback position. So I think that's a good thing for the Iowa Hawkeyes, right? Solidify that quarterback room where you feel good no matter what position you got. Tim Lester actually recruited Brendan Sullivan coming out of high school. So there's a relationship there. There's some camaraderie there, which is good. This is a good thing. I'm also very curious to see how this offense looks under Tim Lester. You watch a lot of Western Michigan tape, shotgun, 11 personnel, 3 wide receivers. It's not exactly the first thing you think of when you think of Iowa Hawkeyes football, is it? No. You think of a couple of tight ends. You think of some really good offensive lines. You think of a fullback. You think of a tailback. You think of all of these things. Iowa, I like their running back room this year as well. They've got 3 really good backs. Receiver, that's the big question for me. Outside of Caleb Brown and maybe Seth Anderson, there's not a ton of talent in the room. And what did we just talk about with Tim Lester? 1, 2, 3 wide receivers out in the formation. So very curious how that is all going to come together. But we've been talking about it for years. When it comes to Iowa, just give me the 80th. Give me the 70th best offense in America. Yeah. That's it. That's it. If we're able to get that, we can win 10 and 11 games every single year instead of maybe dropping down to that 7-win level. This defense is still one of the best. The best in the Big Ten. Yeah. It is a nasty, nasty defense. They've got maybe the best linebacker duo.
Adkins and Jackson, right?
Yeah, you look at Nick Jackson. You look at Jay Higgins as well at that position. Their secondary is really good. And then you mentioned Washington, wrapping up with them. Such a wild card for me. Like, I don't even know what to think. I can't watch tape from last year to find out anything because everybody's gone. Everybody's gone. I like Will Rogers. Okay, that's good. I like the running back duo. I like what they have at receiver. But if nobody can pave the way, if nobody can protect Will Rogers, they could end up in some trouble. Like, how the offensive line and defensive line fills in is going to determine really how the Huskies look this season.
Yeah, totally get it. It's hard to predict with that. Iowa, man, I just think give me some semblance of an offense. We've talked about it at lengths. Cade has been to a college football playoff. There's a lot of good stuff going on there. So if he can get in there and just fortify the offense in a way that hasn't been there in recent years, that team's going to be nasty, man. So just a lot of good stuff to build on. Ted, you are the freaking man, dude. Thank you for coming on. We love talking Big Ten football with you, brother. And thank you for educating myself and the fan base about what's to come with the schedule as we hit summer period of football. So thank you, brother.
Yeah, we still got 3 months to go, but everybody out there in Southern California around Big Ten country, enjoy your summer. Don't wish it away. September will be here soon enough. I'm sure we got a lot to talk about on the Bruin Bible and on Big Ten Ted between now and the early September. So always a great talking to you, Will.
Awesome. Bruin Bible, we are officially out. We will be back later this week. You guys have a good one. All right.